If you want to drive more e-commerce revenue without increasing your ad spend, and you want the revenue today, not in a year, it's email and CRO. That's how you do it. Reconvert customers from long ago and turn existing site traffic into revenue. The cheapest customer is the customer you already have. So if you want help with this, come to pilothouse.co, fill out the lead form, and ask to speak to me directly.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
The customer segments that got you where you are now are not the ones that are going to take you a level higher.
You have to realign the customer journey to the segments that are going to unlock the next stage of growth.
Pick a small world and own it.
If the primary go-to-market was a highly discounted offer to get people to trial their skincare and then stay on as repeat purchase clients, that account, whether it's Google or Meta, is trained on seeking discount buyers. 80% of the consumer segments that purchased a free sample never made another purchase.
It's the world's best email and retention podcast, and I'm your host, Jordan Gordon. We are a member of the DTC network of podcasts and the philosophical home of the Pilothouse email and customer retention team. If you want to make the sweet nectar of low-cost revenue a large part of your digital ecosystem, then follow us on your favorite podcast app today. This time, we are going to discuss the customer segments that got you where you are now are not the ones that are going to take you a level higher. And I'm joined by Rafael Guy, or Raf as we call him. Hello, Raf. How you doing?
Nice to see you, Jogo.
Yeah, nice to see you. So, really cool discussion today, live from the trenches. I wonder if you could maybe just start by quickly telling the audience who you are and your history and also how you and I work together.
Yeah, 100%. So Jogo and I probably see each other at least 3 times a week. We both work on the Pilothouse team, supporting the partnerships group on some of our contracts and sales. So I'm really excited to chat with you today because I think it's really going to be maybe a general discussion about some trends that we're seeing across the board. Specifically, the last couple of weeks, like you mentioned, it's been interesting. A lot of the brands that have come to us have very similar problems, even though that they're in completely different categories. I think you put it well. A lot of people are facing the issue where the customers that got them to, XYZ $1 million in revenue are not the segments that are going to get them to the next phase. So it's a really interesting dynamic that we see. And like Jogo said, a bit of my background, Pilothouse, I kind of help bridge partnerships for sales into delivery because, we have a very simple belief. We're a growth agency, so a very simple growth model. Pick the right clients, we help them grow, and in turn, we grow.
And Raf and I have also both worked at the same company on the brand side at separate times, so we've got similar backgrounds as well.
Yeah, similar people. Yeah, and then my background prior to this was VP of marketing and brand at a 9-figure fashion apparel brand, and I also have a big creative agency experience working at some of the top creative houses globally. So, really excited about getting a chance to work with Jogo.
So let me tee this up. We had we talked to a lot of brands, and in the background we were kind of just saying, hey, this is a thing. So I won't name any brands or anything, but we just spoke to some people. We spoke to a sunglasses brand. We spoke to a skincare kind of products brand. And we spoke to a sports safety gear brand. And the tee up here, there were different reasons, but for a variety of different reasons, the audience they have, the customer base they have is just evolving, changing, and the messaging has to change. On the sunglasses brand, it was a trend. They had a new set of technology, and some people were adopting that technology, some were not. And of course, now you've got to match up your marketing and your kind of product production. On the skincare brand, it was promotional. They went from, many brands, hey, they launch and we're saying, hey, we're going to do samples. Well, now you got a customer base full of samples and you're trying to change your pricing. And then on the sports safety gear, it was demographic. You start and you're protecting kids. Those kids grow up, play in that sport, and then, well, hey, wait, this is for kids. This product's for kids, but actually your product, sport safety applies to everyone. So those were just three brands and three different things that caused the customer base to no longer be the appropriate customer base. Raph, I wonder if you want to just go into some of the things that we said to those brands we were talking to, in our consultations.
Yeah, 100%. I think one of the things that was most interesting, especially about the three brands that you brought up, is they're actually all in different stages, you know? Like one of the brands is scaling from, mid-figure, seven-figure to eight figures. The other one is on the low eight-figure range, has kind of hit a ceiling. And then the third brand, the sunglass brand, is getting close to that nine-figure range, but they're facing some factors for sure, external factors that are pushing down. Yeah. I think the interesting thing maybe that I will kind of talk about is that in all three cases, all three brands were kind of early entrants into some sort of consumer trend. On the sunglasses side, they were one of the first brands that came in and really treated sunglasses like fashion items. And then on the skincare side, it was one of the first brands to truly bring what's popular now, which is the Korean skincare routine, to kind of the masses. But they did that earlier on. Maybe potentially missed the branding wave, but they're kind of hitting a ceiling there. And then on the sports care equipment side, again, really riding a boom of some sporting regulations that made their equipment mandatory. They're one of the entrants into that. They got tons of success, but it's one of those point in time in their businesses where what got them there isn't going to get them into that next stage. So it was interesting to see that. Obviously, Jogo, you were looking at that from a retention email basis. But what's always fascinating is that when we do these consultative audits for prospective clients, the issue that you see in one area of the business kind of cascades across the board, across these three brands. What was interesting, I'm sure you saw this in the retention basis, was that number one, if you look at the revenue overall, it's largely driven by repeat customer base. So the ratio of repeat customer orders far outweighs the existing customer base. And at least for me, I don't know if you think the same way. As soon as repeat customer orders becomes the majority, it's a slow declining growth. You got to figure out how to get that rebalanced again.
You need new customers to grow. Of course, we work in retention, so repeat customers are important. But any brand that doesn't have new customers, of course, that company's eventually going to die. Someone's only on your list for a couple of years. I'd love to talk for a second about the downstream nature. This is the world's best email retention podcast. The downstream nature is your base and how your base reacts to kind of the marketing that you have. But so that downstream nature, first, there's something that happens to the marketing and the new customers. So I'll just start for the audience here. I wonder if you can give a thought on when the audience might be thinking to themselves, am I actually speaking to the wrong people? Is it time that I alter who I'm speaking to or what I'm selling to them?
I think for me, I would say probably the first macro shift is the one that I've kind of discussed, is that new customer to existing customer ratio. For me, that's kind of the first place I tend to look at, because we do so many audits every week, right? We probably average, a minimum 10 brands we're looking at every single week. But I would say that's a metric where a lot of businesses hit a ceiling, but they don't look at the cohorts, or they haven't set up the cohorts to see whether their new customer and existing customer mix is healthy. And it's important to look at it not just on an aggregate level, but on a cohort basis, because some customers, each cohort will have different value. So understanding what you did to acquire that customer is equally as important to understand the health of your business. Because sometimes it might require a full shakeup. Other times it just means that you've changed something that has shifted the type of consumer you're attracting, whether it's messaging, a new promotion, a new channel that you're testing. So I think to answer your question, I think the two metrics I'd look at is understanding the new customer to repeat customer mix, and then truly having a handle of what did you do at that point in time to acquire them, and are you acquiring a valuable long-term customer, which I know that's something that you harp on a lot. I'm going to probably butcher this, but the recency, frequency, average order value cycle that you talk about, I think feeds right into that.
Yeah, and quick trick, everybody at home. Your cohorts are available in Shopify. I like to go in there and set my cohorts to quarterly from monthly. I mean, monthly you get a good view, but when you break it into quarters, you can really start comparing, and you can say, hey, I like same quarter repeat, which is Q0. What share of my buyers was able to get to repeat in one quarter versus the same quarter last year? So tip for everybody there. When we went into some of these, like getting into some of the tactics that we discussed when we were talking to them, from my end on the sports care.
And sorry, Joko, before we jump on that, I also want to maybe highlight one metric that I think you call out quite a lot on your audits. Because I think oftentimes, brands don't diagnose this until it's truly a problem, because like revenue is revenue, if top line's growing, your profitability growing, that new customer mix often tends to stay hidden. But one metric, I don't think I've ever told you this, so the revenue per email sent, because obviously one other signal that you can look at is that if you're not bringing in new customers over time, you're going to burn through your existing customer revenue potential because every customer has an LTV. So if you're over harvesting your existing customer base, that could be an early signal as when your revenue per customer, your email send starts reducing. And I know that's something, for example, you highlighted really with the sunglass brand, I believe, as well as the skincare brand.
Yeah, and it's look, for everybody at home, revenue per email sent a critical email metric. It's available for your flows in Klaviyo. Just it's revenue per recipient. It's actually a little trickier to get it for campaign. Yeah, you can find it in some places in Klaviyo. It's super available for flows. You can always just take your email sent, your revenue, put it in a spreadsheet and divide it. And you should be looking at your revenue per email sent on a monthly, quarterly basis for flows, for campaigns, for your aggregate program. It's an indication of engagement. So thank you for that, Raf.
Yeah, no worries.
I'd like to get into some specifics on these brands because some of the stuff we were talking about was just really cool. From what I was discussing on sports safety brand, this actually wasn't an email thing, it's a website thing. But we said, hey, we'll go and look at your PDPs. The PDP is all like dads talking about how they want to save their kids, right? And well, yeah, of course, someone's going to grow up and say, well, this is for kids. So we talked about bifurcating the site and having, adult and child portions, going to the PDP and, making the PDP for kids, all violins and dads, and making the PDP for adult, just like young adults saying, sports are awesome. And just really playing to those users. And importantly, one of the trends I'm seeing is tons of PDPs are performing poorer than home pages and collection pages. They're underperforming collection and home as entry pages, which is counterintuitive because it's further down the purchase funnel. But PDPs, all the default software out there assumes PDP is a mid-funnel touch point, for qualified traffic. But if you've got catalog ads sending someone directly to PDP, PDP is the landing page. And so you have to understand the audience who's going to land on that and speak to that audience completely fresh if you want to use this important and growing ad source. So that's one of the things that we talked about with those guys.
Well, yeah, 100%. I think, at least for me, when we're looking at it from an integrated basis, it's bringing a customer journey perspective to ads. So to your point, whether it's Meta or any other digital media platform, every single platform has some sort of catalog media format. And I think across the board, regardless of whether you're a $2 million company or a $100 million company, there's always an opportunity to be able to align your merchandising strategy, aka your PDP website, to how you're leveraging some of those catalog ads. And to your exact astute point on the sport safety equipment company, they had grown to a decent, 7-figure revenue base pretty organically by being able to market to parents. And the interesting thing was that unlike most other sport companies or fashion companies where you have a distinct section for kids versus a distinct section for adults or versus teens, by age category, the choice was really to put all the merchandising sizes and storytelling under one PDP, right? So as what we believed the problem was there, as they started to scale their business, they were focusing on the parent ICP to really help drive the purchase for younger kids because it's a safety product. But then you limit who else you're speaking to. You limit speaking to teenagers, right, who don't want to see themselves as a 6-year-old anymore. You limit, potential emerging pro athletes, who are looking for top of the line performance-based product, and they might not think that a piece of equipment that is made for kids is right for them. So that's where there's an example for us where you have to realign the customer journey to the segments that are going to unlock the next stage of growth versus looking at what's worked for you up to this point.
And this actually gets to some of the crux of what we were talking about. I'm glad we got here, which is okay. So let's say we've now kind of fixed the site. What do we and many people talk about when you want to start a new brand? It's like pick a small world and own it. You don't just try to go, Coca-Cola on day one, right? Pick a small market, pick a small kind of audience and own it, right? And so let's say a brand does that and you're like, okay, I've got my, sports safety. Well, I'm going to own family. I'm going to own parents. Okay. Well, now what happens is as you start to evolve who you're speaking to, you have an existing customer base that you're trying to get purchases from, and you've been marketing, one thing to them, and then you want to reach this new audience from an email perspective. You've got generally there's one campaign program. I mean, if you're going to split all your campaigns up by adult and child, that you're doubling your work. You don't want to be doing that, right? So the difficult dance you play is, okay, how can I send a message that resonates with this new audience without it, and still get the benefit from my core audience? And if we shift to the skincare product, it's really evident there because they had a whole audience they built on a sample. It was like hey, give us a try, really good deal. A whole audience they built on that sample, and that audience had a certain value they assumed the product was because it was discount driven. And then they wanted to change to a new audience with a more premium price. And it's fine. You can do that in your ads. You can do that on your site. But the nice thing about an email audience is every time you do a big launch through your advertisement, you send out the email and you get all these purchases. It drives up your ROAS for that month. It unlocks future spend. But if your message falls flat on that existing audience, you have to do so much. You have to climb so much higher with the new audience. And so, look, it's a big problem you and I have both faced at kind of different companies. Yeah, I wonder if maybe if you can share some of your thoughts when we were talking to that brand on how they'd address the market as they make this change.
Yeah, it was really interesting to get under the hood on that business, because they've been around for about 10 years. They had grown the business to a pretty healthy 8-figure revenue business. But as they look to find profitable growth, they had to completely change their customer acquisition funnel, which was largely reliant on free samples and a pretty significant free sample program. I think that's really a brave decision for any business to make, to recognize that they have to change something. But it is not a simple shift, right? Because at least, on the platform side, all platforms have some sort of algorithm that they're using to optimize and find high value consumers. And algorithms need signals, aka they rely on the past. So if you can imagine, if the primary go-to-market was a highly discounted offer to get people to trial their skincare and then bolt and latch on and stay on as repeat purchase clients, that account, whether it's Google or Meta, is trained on seeking discount buyers. So one of the things we were able to unearth was that 80% of the consumer segments that purchased a free sample never made another purchase. So this algorithm is truly trained to find discount shoppers. So, when we talk to them, one of the biggest aha moments that we have to lay out is that you have to completely retrain your database because the mass majority of your existing customer base, 80%, are not consumers that are your most valuable consumers. And I know you saw that on the email side as well, because we're sending a ton of emails with very limited revenue in return. So it's a bit of a pray approach versus, I think, for them to unlock this next stage of growth is they're going to have to model their business based on the few consumers that are truly purchasing and staying on, and figure out how do we acquire that customer, that profitable customer, in a more scalable way.
And the interesting thing is there's multiple ways you can get a mismatch there, right? You can get a mismatch, your existing customer base to the new customer base. You can get a mismatch on how advertising is going out and seeking the appropriate client, Andromeda, etc.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that you say that, because I know we talk about signals oftentimes from a conversion basis, but with Andromeda, you have to be consistent, right? Because creative is the new targeting. So you have to understand exactly what segment you're going after, make sure that the creative expresses a message that appeals to that segment, and then the purchase is going to justify to the platforms that you are relevant to that consumer group. So it's like, you have to understand the signals, not just from a purchase cycle perspective, but also from a media perspective as well. It's making, I think, everybody, forcing, I say, traditional D2C marketers to go back to the classics and become, classic brand marketers as well. Because you need to understand your segment for your messaging. And yeah, I don't know if this is where you're going. And it's like, it was really omnipresent for one of the larger brands we audited that were getting to 9 figures, because the value equation in the sunglasses market has changed quite a lot. So, it was interesting to see how their traditional cohort, AOV, the cohort that got them to where they're at now, was purchasing sub $100, in every order. But that was collapsing underneath them because of the other value competitors are coming to market. And what was actually growing was their products that was north of $100 AOV, right? So that's also an interesting real mix where, really successful business, on the path to, being a healthy 9-figure brand. And then out of nowhere overnight, their core segment drops up completely under them and they see a new segment emerging. Yeah. So how do you navigate that shift is an interesting.
Yeah, and so if we talk about customer base, by the way, everyone in audience land, I do have an episode. It might be 43. I don't know when it is. You got to go back and look. But there's some episodes there where I talk about customer base, and so there's a specific technical way that we analyze customer base. I invite you to go and review those episodes and think how you could use them for your purposes. And there's a few different customer base things we're talking about here. On the sunglass example, it's not actually a mismatch of new customer base coming in and old customer base. They've actually got two bases inside their business. They've got one that's, say, value based, right? Purchasing a largely commoditized product. And then they've got customers who are purchasing higher technology, basically a higher quality product. And when we went in, and here's where, at home, just go and find those episodes where we talk about customer base, and you just run your customer base, and go in your segment in Klaviyo, you just say, and has purchased
Yeah.
from. You put in your collection, right? And run a base for one kind of product, and run a base for another kind of product. And we do talk about different bases in those episodes. And yeah, we found like one base was going up, one base was going down. The thing looks
quite significantly too. Yeah. So
Yeah.
blended, yeah. They hit in the business period double-digit decline, but it was being propped up by a product that was 2 to 3 times their AOV. So their core product was collapsing even faster. But the exciting part was, at the end of the day too, was that, we had a really great conversation with them. Our focus wasn't necessarily on the tactics, but reminding them that, you built a business not on, XYZ price point or XYZ warranty or policy. You actually are a brand that provides people with value. Value is not cheap. Value doesn't have to be discounted. So what we try to orient their conversation around is, you can still scale the business as is. You just have to figure out what is that integrated approach to creating value for the customer segment that now wants a different type of product, and how do you start shifting your business to serve this new market, right? Because it's not like they're doing something wrong. It's the socioeconomic macro situation. It's changing how people spend, because I'm sure we've all heard this, because, people talk about inflation, people talk about K-shaped recoveries, that middle is disappearing. So you got people with money who can spend more and expect more. And then your value seekers who want things cheaper, that middle class is shrinking a little bit, right? So it's really things outside of the
An
control of the
important part
brand.
there,
It's just readjusting to what the market wants. Yeah.
an important part of that is, look, if you're a brand and you haven't made the decision of where you're going on the K, that's not good. You part of your strategy has to be, you know, where are we going? Are we going up market or down market? There's no middle market. And so, yeah, we do talk to brands and talk about, make recommendations on what direction they might take that. The cool thing in that case was, going in and looking and seeing that what was growing was this higher tech, higher AOV portion of the business. Well, that's nice because that's a nicer wave to get on and surf. And then it's just about kind of building out all of our assets to see that.
Exactly. And, to your point around self-fulfilling prophecy, right? Um, the clients we were chatting to knew that that type of product line was growing, but to them it was a smaller proportion, right? So then if you looked at their meta accounts, talking about signals, front end and back end signals, most of their ads, I'm just going to throw in numbers, 50, 60, 70% plus from a creative standpoint and a media delivery standpoint. We're still speaking to that old consumer base that was shrinking versus right sizing it and starting to invest and fuel the momentum that they were seeing for a value-based purchaser who was looking for something that was a bit higher quality, perceived quality. So, yeah.
Okay, thanks for coming on the pod, Raf. And
Yeah, I mean, are we going to hopefully make this a regular thing, eh?
yeah, I'd love to have you back on. We were talking about it. Everybody out there, we were talking about having these discussions more because, I mean, of course, look, I talk retention, but then retention from what? It's so nice to have the tee up of here's the brand that we're talking to. How would we deal with emails and site and post click after that? So, do look forward to having you on again. And
Yeah.
in the meantime, entrepreneurs, executives, spammers, and webmasters, have fun spamming.
In the inbox late night, glowing screen, see the light. Email, everything feels alright.
Hey entrepreneurs and spammers, remember, you can't scale without email, and the cheapest customer to acquire is the customer you already have. So please subscribe to the world's best email and retention podcast and learn how to make low-cost revenue a big part of your digital ecosystem.